I had, kind of like slowly escalating concerns about inaction on climate change and, where we were headed.
I learned about climate change from my parents and from spending lots and lots of time outside as a little kid. Um, and since I've grown up for my entire 20 years here in Bozeman, um, I've gotten to see some changes in the environment around me.
As an interpretive ranger, I was working on cruise ships and giving educational programs about the cultural and natural history of the area. And every day on these ships, we would go up to the same glacier. And over the course of a single summer, I saw this really profound glacial retreat just over the course of half a year. And that was really the first time in my life that I couldn't really literally look away. It was something that was really, really palpable and I was confronted with on a daily basis. And it really inspired me to think in a more academic way about where I wanted to go with my understanding of climate change.
So initially I started as a biochemistry major, and then had the privilege of taking an environmental health class with Dr. Mary Eggers at MSU. And I always kind of had aspirations to somehow be involved in the medical field. And taking the environmental health class really opened up my eyes to how intertwined the environment and our physical health really is. And if we can't have a healthy climate or environment, the prospect of healthy lives is really dim in my eyes. So that was a really beautiful door she opened.
This is what I care about so much, just on a personal level, because I'm connected to the outdoors, to nature, to this kind of environmental perspective. But I also, through my professional career, really have this strong inclination toward addressing health disparities, and these two things really kind of like merged and clicked for me.
I grew up with a strong appreciation of like nature and being outdoors and camping, hiking, skiing, that type of thing. But I didn't really make the connection between climate change and health till it almost had to like hit me in the face, I'd say. So I did my residency in the Bay Area in California, and I was on like a spinal cord injury rotation when one of the like terrible wildfire seasons happened, and we had some of the worst air quality in the world at that time. And I was working with a very vulnerable population. Their lungs are very vulnerable due to their neurological injuries. And so we had to ban all our patients from even going outside because we were worried about them getting pneumonia, respiratory failure, being put on ventilators, and potentially even dying. And so at that point, I was like, oh, this whole climate change thing is having real life health consequences even right now.
My perception was, wow, the community is changing and there's this collective interest in preserving. And certainly I grew up out in California, so the John Muir, Gordon Pinshaw struggle over conservation versus preservation, I was so acutely aware of. And I've been to Yosemite and I've been to the areas. So that really sparked my interest for this prevention side. So then that's when I decided to go back to school, earn a master's and PhD, and that environmental health piece.
It's cool to be on the prevention side of things because I don't know, if you're treating something over and over again and you know that there's this greater issue like wildfire smoke causing increased risk of increased asthma attacks, then it's like, well, why don't we look at this a little bit more holistically?
I just kind of got really interested in watershed health and watershed management and the health of our rivers and aquatic habitat and all that stuff. And what happened is I kept sort of chasing those problems upstream into broader scales. And that led me into kind of how we use the land. So forest management and agriculture. And then of course you start chasing those issues. And before you know it, you're into climate and you're realizing how much, like all of these issues across the landscape stem from from just, natural climate variability and weather patterns. And then of course you start to add the man-made components, and it just becomes really, really challenging. And you can't really get at these kind of smaller landscape scale issues unless you're really trying to understand climate.
Over time, of course, climate has become a pressing concern. So I've been working on it for probably 20 years to expand awareness, to understand it better, to help drive down pollution and greenhouse gas emissions from healthcare, particularly, to work on really moving my profession of nursing toward including more of this information in curriculum, to pushing for it in research.
Climate change is, as many of us know, it encompasses everything else. We don't take care of climate change without taking care of everything else on all those other levels and all those other layers. But it really is the, I always say that the highlight that informs me and what I do. So besides all the other concerns that I would say that I had, or ways that I wanted to participate in the world to be a good steward of the earth, climate change really became the beacon of that.
I guess I woke up one day and thought, what should I do next? I've done all my personal choices. I've done all that. What can I do to move forward? And then I was involved in this legislative, the AAP legislative committee, and people asked, what were your priorities? And then out of my mouth came climate, because that really, I guess I just had to be asked. And then it became obvious that that's really where I needed to go.
I was activated by the IPCC's report in 2018 around 1.5 degree warming and the importance of hitting that mark. I read reporting around the report and part of the executive summary. And while data doesn't move a lot of people, to be honest, stories are more effective and personal connections. I am moved by data. I have a background in biology, undergraduate degree in biology, and it just hit me fully reading the reporting about it, kind of what we're faced with as a planet. And I've told this story before, but I had a really dark night of the soul and pretty much woke up the next day completely changed and completely committed to action.
I had been reading about climate change, and I just am a person that if I see a problem, I kind of feel like I need to get in there and try to do something about it. And I went to an informational meeting about Citizens Climate Lobby about possibly starting a chapter in Missoula. And I left the meeting as the new head. But my motivation is my children are raising young children, and they are concerned, but they just don't have time. So I am doing that work for them and for my grandkids.
About 8 or 10 years ago, we actually took a critical look at the literature and the scientific evidence and realized that we had just missed the boat on what was happening with climate change. And that's when we decided to become more involved. Started giving lectures across Montana with lots of different organizations about the health impacts of climate change.
We worked with a number of different climate and health groups, and some just plain old climate groups for a number of years, mostly on the national level, and then came to realize that we really needed action in Montana. And so we formed the Montana Health Professionals for Healthy Climate about 2 years ago. Since that time, it's grown. We have a number of people that have signed on with us. We have a lovely board, and the group is active in Montana, both giving presentations, working with other organizations that are concerned about climate. Several of our board members helped author the Climate Change and Human Health report that just came out this year for as a section of the Montana Climate Assessment. So it really, anything we can do to move the needle on climate action in Montana, we've tried to do.